All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Jessica Ann Mitchell. I will your founder of the National Black Cultural Information Trust. And today you are joining us for the Reparation Information Thought Series, which is a periodic strategic webinar featuring reparations experts, racial justice thought leaders, and you engaged in critical discussion, reflection, and analysis on issues pertinent to the movement for reparatory justice in the United States and abroad, co-hosted by the Reparation Education Project led by Nikiti Taifa. Today, we are discussing rehabilitation and healing, the role of social workers in the reparations movement. Pursuant to international norms, rehabilitation is a major aspect of reparations. Beyond unraveling consequences from the enslavement era and its vestiges, drug addiction, unemployment, torn families, etc., social workers play a huge role. Yet the social work profession holds the dubious legacy of oppression while articulating services for our most vulnerable. To delineate the history and role of social work in today's reparations movement, a multi-generational veteran panel from the National Association of Black Social Workers will share their perspectives. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. And thank you so very much, Jam, for setting that up. I'm just so very thrilled that my colleagues are on this line, and we are talking about intergenerational because I know Melissa Smith Haley, it's part of the younger generation, shall I say, me having taught her husband in law school, but that was several decades ago, to Baba Leonard Dunston on the other end, talking about really veteran elder in this whole movement, and our dear brother BabaJay Onaje Muid, who is an elder as well, but I would say he might be more so in the middle between Baba Leonard Dunston and my dear sister Melissa Smith Haley. So what we're going to do is let me just first give what their titles are, and we're going to give them a few minutes to fully introduce themselves and share with us as part of their opening remarks a little bit more about their background in social work, their motivation to be a social worker, and why they feel that the issue of reparations is so very pertinent and important in this field. So again, we're very honored to have with us Baba Elder Leonard Dunston, who is the President Emeritus of the National Association of Black Social Workers and the founder and past director of the Black Family Summit. And we have our dear sister, Melissa Smith Haley, who is the current president of NABSW, National Association of Blacks and Social Workers. And we have our dear BabaJay, Dr. Onaje Muid. I think all of our guests are doctors here, co-chair of NABSW National Relations Committee and co-chair of the NCOBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, Health Committee. Commission. So which one of you all really wants to start and kick us off with fully introducing yourself a little bit more to our Reparation Information Thought Series participants?
Permission to speak, Baba?
I think I see Melissa. We're going to start with the sister. Okay, Melissa Smith Haley, current president of NABSW. Kick us off, my sister.
I am so happy to be here with you all today to talk about something that I was raised on. The National Association of Black Social Workers, I am blessed to be a second generation member. My father was a colleague and a comrade of Baba Leonard Dunston, Morris F.X. Jeff. He believed in Black liberation to the 10th power, and he believed in surrounding himself by kings like himself. My father transitioned 10 years ago this year, but his legacy still remains. I am currently the vice president of program operations at a nonprofit organization in New Orleans, Louisiana. We manage $40 million worth of nonprofit dollars, federal, state, and we do work with individuals. Now, 100% of the people that we serve have a common denominator. They are poverty stricken. And the majority of the people we serve are people who look like me. So the oppression that you speak with when social work is alive and well, and we still are working in those areas today. As the 14th president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, I'm 7 years removed from when Baba was the 7th president of the National Association of Black Social Workers. The world has changed. The world has changed significantly because we now have access to the internet. We have worldwide connections where liberation does not stop at your state line, that it can go and you can collaborate. We have over 80 chapters, over 2,000 members of Black people who are committed to the National Association of Black Social Work Code of Ethics that is older than I am. And nothing has changed because in America today, no Black person except the selfish or irrational can claim neutrality in the quest for Black liberation. That is the preamble of the Code of Ethics that my ancestors and my elders proudly built and that we currently stand on.
Wow, thank you so very much for that. And I think we're going to go to BabaJay, Onaje Muid, and then in our introductions with our eldest elder, Leonard Dunston. So go on, BabaJay, Onaje.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here with my teacher, Baba Leonard Dunston, and my dear, dear sister, Nkechi, and certainly the current president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, Melissa, who in fact said uh, we that our organization needs to be a member of NCOBA. And I'll just add, for those who may not know, Baba Leonard Dunston also is a former board member of NCOBA. So that's one of the things that wasn't mentioned that would certainly would need to be mentioned right now. I'll start off by saying I'd like to give honor and respect to ancestor Bob Knox, who was a former chairperson of the New York chapter of the National Association of Black Social Workers. And it was him who drove out to Stony Brook, Long Island, you know, to be my mentor and be my, it was called field advisor. And the work that he did for all those many years for the New York chapter brought me in. And this is one criticism I have of the National Association of Black Social Worker, is that we use a definition. If you're a Black person and you're doing community work, you are a Black social worker. So that means all of you more likely on this call can be members of our organization. I still put forth the demand and the request that we double our membership overnight, because every single person of the National Association of Black Social Workers can know someone who's doing community work, who is Black, and they're not a member. So I'm saying, let's go ahead and double our resources overnight. You know, it's been said that caring for one another is an African way. I mean, we're the one who created, you know, relationships. I mean, humanity, the whole thing, right? So social work is really an invention to fill the gap that the harm of European capitalism produces. So James Brown says, you know, use what you got to get what you want, or get what you need. So as a young Black revolutionary, Pan-Africanist, internationalist, I saw it anyway in all ways to heal our people and build our people. So I entered the field in 1986. Well, really entered in 1980 when I was working for Arrowhead, but really got fully involved when I became an employee of Face Piggyback, which is an organization in Harlem, New York, and worked there from 2000, excuse me, from 1986 to 2000. And then went after that worked for Phoenix House, and then after that worked for a Reality House for another 15 years. So for 25 years, I was given tutelage under two very strong African men. One was Abu Karim Shabazz from Face Piggyback, and the other one was Leonard Dunston, who was the executive director of Reality House. And in that time, I met Baba Leonard, and he became a mentor of mine as well. So I stand on some, you know, some strong shoulders. So as social work is my vocation, I must also say to you that human rights is my avocation, in that I became a student of Yusef Clyde, who was Malcolm's chairperson of the Organization of African American Unity in Canada. And that really came much about through Nkechi, who invited me to join NCOBA. So these histories go back a long time, and I'm truly honored and so pleased to be here with you today. Asante Sana.
Asante Sana Sikitu. And you know, we talk about we all stand on the shoulders of people. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And Baba Leonard Dunston, you are a giant whose shoulders I stood on. And I know that Melissa and Onaje have stood on, and so many others. So we're just so esteemed that you are in our presence. You are a reservoir of knowledge and history and the like. So share with us a little bit more specifically about your background, particularly from in New York with your work with the state all down through the social work. So Baba Lenny, I'm turning it over to you now.
Thank you, Queen. Hotep family. Let me first of all commend you, Queen, for your years of legendary work on behalf of African people. And while I'm meeting your co-host for the first time, let me convey to her the same platitudes to Brother Onaje and to Queen Melissa. It's always a pleasure to share a platform with them. Let me sort of frame my comments, I guess, from more of a historical perspective than a personal one, but it will be personal in that I'll reference some of the work that I've done. I had to first start off by saying that I was introduced to the reparations movement initially by my Jegna, Brother Sini Jomo Williams, who was the first president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, excuse me, but most specifically in his role as president of the New York City chapter of the National Association of Black Social Workers, who in May of 1967 hosted a New York City chapter meeting at IS 201 in Harlem. That's a school. We had a one-day conference on reparations, and I was just floored by the number of people who he had invited to be presenters and to inform those of us who were new to the social work profession as in terms of the role of reparations. And that's how I really wanted to kind of start my conversation today in Kichi. I could talk a bit about my background, but that's not that significant other than to say that I began my career as a street gang worker in New York. And I think the significance of that ties into a brother who hired me by the name of, at the time, we knew him as Vincent Godwin. He was the head of the New York City Department of Youth Services. And he worked very closely with another brother by the name of Professor, why am I blocking his name now? But Preston Wilcox, who was at Columbia University. They trained all of us who were street gang workers back in the mid 60s to do this work. And as a part of that cohort, there was another brother who was very close to us by the name of James Turner. We were all in the same class together, along with another sister, Viola Plummer. Her husband and I were all in the same class together. And it was because of Brother Kalanje Olugususum that my professional career got off to such an amazing start. And as I reflected on today's discussion, I could not help but start by saying, while my career has been a very, in my opinion, a very successful one, had not it been for Kalanje's exposure of us to the various activists who were a part of the New York City scene at that time, I'm not quite sure how I would have grown as a professional. Just to give you some sense of who was at that conference in May of 1967, my wife, my ancestor wife, who I always had to lift up because it was her who really introduced me to the movement back in 1956. That's when we first met as high school sweethearts. But she was then the president of the NAACP high school chapter. And then we subsequently went on to undergraduate school, and she got me involved in CORE in 1959, to be specific. And it was her exposure to Malcolm X and his readings in front of Brother Michaud's bookstore on 125th Street and 7th Avenue. I was in the Army at the time, and every time I would come home on leave, I would get a 3-day pass. And every Saturday, with religiously, she would take me to Harlem to listen to Brother Malcolm give speeches. I tie all this in because it was during this time that I began to be exposed to what it meant to be a Pan-Africanist. And I had to lift her up, but I need to go back to the whole role of how we got to this whole notion of the significance of reparations. At that conference, at IS 201, was Queen Mother Moore, and I'll never forget it to this day. My wife was sitting next to me, and she said, "Leonard, I need to go and just say hello to this woman." My wife went over and embraced Queen Mother Moore, and up until about 2 years ago, I had a picture that I had kept in a very prominent spot, but for some reason, I can't seem to find that picture now. But it was Queen Mother Moore who really laid out for us at that conference why Black social workers should be involved in the reparations movement. So I lay it out because oftentimes we don't pay homage to those who introduced us to the movement. And had not it been for Brother Sini Jomo Williams' vision of how the Black social workers chapter at that time should be involved, I would have never known about the reparations movement. At that conference also was a sister by the name of Queen Mother Dolores Blakely. She's now still very active. I could go through a list of others who were involved, but I think I'll stop there by just simply saying that as a result of that introduction, I met a brother by the name of Brother Porkchop Davis. He was a street vendor, and Brother Porkchop Davis, I'll not spend time on him, but he was at that conference. And over the years, we developed a very personal relationship. The other brother that I have to just call out his name, these are all ancestors, but I think it's significant for us to remember who they were. Brother Charles Kenyatta, who then at the time was Brother Malcolm, had been Brother Malcolm X's bodyguard. And we became very, very close. Brother James Small and Brother Leonard Jeffries, they were very close to us because they're in Harlem at that time. Everybody was very, very closely knitted. The last and certainly not least of those was a brother by the name of Elambe Brath. I had to call out Brother Elambe Brath because it was through him and Sister Viola Plummer and the December 12th Coalition that over the years we were able to form a very formidable working relationship around reparations in New York City. So I'll stop there because I know I've been over my limit, but I could not start without calling out the names of those ancestors who played such a significant role in introducing me to the reparations movement as a Black social worker, but most specifically, Brother Sini Jomo Williams and his vision of what it meant to be an African-centered social worker. And coming out of that, and I'll end on this note, was what we call now the African American Day Parade. That was started in 1969 by 3 Black social workers, and it incorporated a reparations segment every Sunday. And that was done by C. Williams, a brother by the name of Livingston Wingate, who was the head of the Urban League in Harlem at the time, and Brother Abe Snyder, who was active with our New York City chapter. Thank you.
Baba, you are truly a walking history book. I mean, I could just sit and listen to you for just ages and ages. Thank you for going back through the annals of time. This information is so very pertinent, particularly for people who walked and talked and learn from these legends. And just to make sure everyone realizes that the Vincent Godwin that you spoke of, who was one of the anti-gang leaders or whatever in New York, it's a person who later changed his name, as you mentioned, to Kalonji Olusegun, who was the first male co-chairperson of NCOBA, National Coalition of Blacks Reparations in America, who I work very, very closely with. And so thank you for lifting all that up. I'm going to turn it over, wait a minute, Baba, okay. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host to ask the first question, but BabaJay, I see your hand up real quick. Did you want to add something to that?
Yes, I do. I do want to
right,
mention that anytime we mention Elambe Brath, we must mention the name Irvin Davis.
Okay, yeah.
Anytime we mention Elambe Brath, Irvin Davis' name must be placed there because they were the co-founders of the Patrice Lumumba Coalition. And you talk about Pan-Africanism, you talk about the connection between our people and African revolutions. They did that together as a team. Of course, we lost them very early in the game, but Irvin Davis was also my teacher as well. So I want to include him as well as we remembering our giants.
So I just want to say all these dots connect because Irvin Davis was a very close colleague of Queen Mother Dorothy Lewis, who also is a founder of the Reparation, the modern era of the Reparations Movement. So all these dots connect. And you mentioned Viola Plummer. All of these folk were instrumental in what's going on in New York right here today in terms of the establishment of a statewide reparations commission. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to turn it over to Jam to officially ask next question so we can bring in the rest of the panel. Oh, I just love you all.
It's already going so well. I feel like the first question was already answered. But we could just go a little bit deeper into it. You already said your backgrounds on social work and your motivation for being a social worker. But why do you feel the issue of reparations is particularly important to the field of social work?
So I'm gonna talk about the oppression that you speak of in social work in particular. You know, when you see the social work history and any MSW, BSW, you cannot graduate from social work school without hearing about Jane Addams. She is the mother of social work. She has come this whole way and she's done all of this stuff. You know, I do a presentation called Ida and Jane because every step of the way and ahead in terms of liberation work for Black people, Ida B. Wells was there. Ida B. Wells was more of a social worker than Jane Addams was, but you would never know that unless you went to a HBCU and you hear about the work that Ida B. Wells did and how Jane Addams did come in to address the issue of lynching, but not in a way in which Ida B. Wells respected. So the system of social work has continued to manifest the status quo in America. And it does so in a way that, of course, you cannot expect those who benefit from your oppression to liberate you, right? And in social work, it's done a great job of it continuing to use oppression using federal dollars and systems. So when you look at one of the issues that NABSW addressed long ago was transracial adoption. It began to define us as an organization as if that's all we did. And of course, social workers did a whole lot of things, but NABSW was as clear as Native Americans were in terms of being really clear that this adoption system was oppressive and that Black people were being excluded from the adoption equation and that our children are being used as pawns to benefit other people's lifestyle, more about the right to parent as opposed to the right of the child to be in a nurturing environment that reflects their environment of origin. So NABSW wrote something in 1973 about transracial adoption. Still today, J. Tony Oliver, who was the 12th president of NABSW, she still right now, she wants to abolish the child welfare system. And in our newsletter, Why We Can't Wait, where we'll celebrate 60 years in July of the Dr. Martin Luther King's book of Why We Can't Wait, there are things as social workers that we need to do right now. If you look at the social work licensure system is designed to keep Black social workers in low-paying jobs, a standardized test that has no validity to demonstrate the competency that if you pass this test, you are then a social worker. Now, when I graduated from a accredited school of social work, it was said that when you graduate, you're a competent social worker. But now there are extra, what do they call it, voting tests that you have in order to keep Black people in low minimum wage jobs in the social work field. My grandmother was an Eastern Star. She was a social worker, but she could not have access to education back during those times. Now we are continuing to get the education. I, at 55 years old, in the doctoral program, because I want the thirst for knowledge. I want to know what we can do to continue the liberation efforts of Baba Leonard and all the ancestors that he called. Above me, you see Ujima. We were taught it is collective work and responsibility. It is not something that you should do. It's not something that you could do. It's something that you must do with the tools that the Creator and the ancestors give you to liberate the people that we serve.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You actually went into answering part of the next question. So what I would love for everyone else to do is go into why you feel the issue of reparations is important to the field. And it has been said that the social work profession holds the dubious legacy of oppression while articulating services for the most vulnerable. So can you explain that statement, and how does the field of social work in general and National Association of Black Social Workers in particular align with the issue of reparations?
Would you like to go, or would you like me to go?
Yeah, BabaJay, you can go on.
Okay.
Go.
So, in social work, we use this, it's the name of a course. It's called Understanding Human Behavior in the social environment. But it's not just social environment. It's an economic environment. It's a political environment. It's a historical environment. And once we do that, then we bring in these questions that this country does not want us to entertain. They do not want us to entertain the question of genocide, and they do not want us to entertain the question of slavery. So to be a social worker of the true magnitude, you have to take all those dimensions into consideration. So once you do that, of course, you're going to talk about the crime. In 2001, and Keisha, you was there, in Durban, South Africa, slavery was declared a crime against humanity. On an international level, there's three major international crimes: genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Our people don't even know that that was a declaration in 2001. And they're trying to push that under the rug like as if it never happened. But the significance of that is to understand we were a victim by criminals, by criminal intent, criminal action. And therefore, if there's a criminal, there must be a victim. If there's a victim, there must be a harm. If there's a harm, there must be a remedy if it's going to be rectified. So reparations is really at the heart and soul of particularly Black social workers. And if we don't understand that, we're not even fully educated to who we are and what we should be doing. We can't be a social worker. Why? Because we can't solve macro problems with a micro solution. It's impossible. You have to have the solution equal to the problem, which means we have to look at it on a macro level, which in fact is reparations. Reparations has, internationally, at least about 5 different, aspects: restitution, rehabilitation, compensation, cessation where it doesn't happen again, and also rehabilitation. The rehabilitation part is so important because even if we were given those other parts and we're not healed as a people, we'll just continue to hurt each other, and we'll continue to stay in the cycle of oppression. So I say that reparations is really at the core, heart and core of who we are as Black social workers. With that, I'm complete. Sante Sana.
Baba Lenny, do you have any comments on this?
No, I think it's Brother Onaje has conveyed my thoughts quite well. Let me just say in general that in looking at the questions that you shared with us and the responses that you will probably get, those will probably be more practical coming from the two of them, meaning Sister Haley and Brother Onaje, than me, because they are more current in terms of practice than I could possibly be. I've been out of the profession since 1994, so I would not have contributions that I can make, because I've always felt that as an activist, there are positions that I take that are not particularly in line with how social workers view this whole issue of reparations. Mine is more in line with how Incover's positions have aligned itself over the years. So I guess I'll make this comment in terms of responding to your question, Queen. I became involved on the national level with Incover through attorney Adjoa Ayatora, who was a former colleague of mine who was very active with NABSW back in the day. And she had invited NABSW during my presidency to become a part of the litigation committee. That's how I met more formally Sister Nkechi. And we subsequently brought into the committee, or at least we met Brother Onaje. So I've always deferred to those whose knowledge of certain areas, excuse me, I think is superior to mine. As an activist, I think I would just kind of leave my comments to for a little bit later in this conversation at the moment.
So that's fine. And as we progress in the conversation, Baba Lenny, we don't have any problem whatsoever with you expressing any views that push the envelope or that might go beyond the bounds of what's acceptable within organized entities, 501c3s like National Association of Black Social Workers. So feel free to just be you and speak your mind from your vantage point as a historic, legendary elder, whether you stopped formally working in this area in 1994 or whatever. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go on and move along. So Jam, do you want to go to the next question?
Sure.
Before you do that, I do want to add that there is a major oppressive element to evidence-based practices. So there are some social workers out there who work in the clinical field and they talk about evidence-based practices. So the assumption with evidence-based practice is what works for white people work for Black people. They work for everybody, right? And they don't take into account the decades, centuries of purposeful oppression and what the impact of that oppression and generational trauma that manifested itself in things that you talked about when you first started off in terms of substance abuse and mental health issues and stress and overeating and addiction to food and alcohol and things of that nature. The evidence-based practices are clear that when they show the evidence-based practice, nothing that Freud did, nothing that Skinner did, they did not do any of those things with Black people. Now, in order to get paid in this field, you have to cite these Western psychology practices as effective in order to continue to service the people, even though we may be doing something completely different, right? Even though we may be teaching about the principles of Nguza Saba, we're talking about self-determination, we're talking about cooperative economics, we're talking about healing our ancestors and things of that nature, that even when you're doing these things, you can't document that to Kaiser, right? You can't document that to managed care organizations because it doesn't have the evidence in this European Western society that's required in order to get reimbursement. So the catch-22 that you deal with is if you don't document it, you don't get paid. And if you don't get paid, you don't have the opportunity to provide the service. So very often what we're doing is African-centered, that we're utilizing African-centered practice and methodology in an effort to heal the community that we serve in order to help them move forward. And when you're looking at things like housing and things of those nature, when we have this constant gentrification, constant efforts of economic oppression that keeps us out of the communities that we built and lived and served. So these are the kind of oppressive practices that continue to exist in the field that Black practitioners have to manage to liberate our people in an effort to serve.
Thank you so much, Sister Melissa. We're gonna, BabaJay, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Sister Melissa. She's always bringing it. I'm telling you, that's my president for real, for real. You know, it's important for us to understand how oppression works, and she gave us one example of that. But I'm gonna go a step underneath that and tie it to what is called the DSM, right? The Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right? Was check this out. It came into existence in 1952. Now, people say, so what? Well, it happens with the year I was born, right? But also, it's the same year that they challenged and finally took off what it was to be American. See, to be American, you had to be 21 and you had to be white. That stayed on the books to 1952. So they took off one level of constriction, right? And then that's when this whole mental thing came into existence. So if you look at the history of DSM, now it's up to DSM-5. In there's no discussion about oppression. So as the co-chair of NCOBRA's Health Commission, we're saying we need our own health system. In fact, NCOBRA says there are 5 basic, harms that we want to address. The first one is peoplehood. If you take a people and you take away from them the idea that they are a group, right, a nation, you've already diminished them, right? So the second thing is economics, criminal justice, education, and of course, health, right? We're saying we have to start with those 5 in order to get some sense of what the harm has been over time, what the harm is now, and how then do we build these institutions that's for our well-being. So thank you, Melissa, for bringing into the conversation how these structures work to oppress us and what liberation. So we have to define liberation for us. No one can define it for us. And reparations is certainly a very key part of that. Santi Sano.
Thank
And
you.
when you look at those areas, Bamba, when you look at education, you look at the criminal justice system, you look at those elements, Black people, Sister Cynthia, we're not at the table, but we on the menu. We are clearly what's on the menu when it comes to criminal justice. We are clearly what's on the list for the lack of education. I live in New Orleans, where 100% of our school system is a charter school system. It's privatized. Even the charter school people like, whoa, what's going on in New Orleans? And they all rank as C, D, and F schools. So when you are privatizing public education, where people are making money off of you, you're getting into a heads and beds situation that you get paid just for people showing up or logging in for that matter. But in terms of how do we really educate the next generation? And when you look at HBCUs, where Baba Leonard went, my father went, where all of our elders and ancestors who were able to get an education, where you were really learning from people who looked like you, who were invested in the situation you were in. Even if you were in the same schoolhouse, when you got out of that schoolhouse, you were going to leave knowing everything that you needed to do to start your family and to work and help your community. So these 5 things that you named are things that are very clear that are been attacks on Black people economically in an effort to ensure to keep us in an underclass, and how we have to liberate ourselves from those systems. And when you hear Baba Leonard talk about at 83 years strong, that he can still remember those people who walked before us. And in order to heal those people, we have to continue to call their names. We have to continue to acknowledge their value that they brought to the community and to spring forth off that value in terms of what we can do to educate the next generation of Black social workers, the next generation of Black healers across the country in an effort to undo some of the damage that continues to be done.
Jam, why don't we proceed this way? That's okay. Because our panelists have so much information to share, and I know that there are questions in the Q&A. Why don't you collapse the last two questions together and let them talk, just talk, okay? And then let's just go to the Q&A from the audience. Let's do it. So to give them the next two questions together, let them rock and roll and then go to the.
Okay, so these will be combined. And I really do think this is a good segue because y'all are talking about some key components you're breaking down that need to be addressed from the Black perspective. So what are some key social work services that can be utilized in reparations programs, and how have Black social workers utilized rehabilitation and healing for Black communities? And then secondly, why do you think social work is often left out of discussions on reparations, and what can be done about that? Anybody like to address those first?
Well, I would say what we do is we do cultural adaptations, that we work with individuals. When you've been doing something as long as I have, you don't need a tool to do an assessment. You don't need a piece, you can talk to somebody, you can feel their energy, you can see where they're coming from. I don't need to sit down and fill out a paperwork. That's what I tell the young practitioners. Look, if you sit by some in front of somebody who's hurting, and as you talking, you taking notes, you talking, you're not building a relationship. You're not engaging in an effort to meet people where they are. And that is real important, that we don't elevate ourselves, that we are unlike our predecessors. Like when you talk about Jane Addams, they were friendly visitors. We are vested members of our community. These are our brothers, these are our uncles, these are our cousins who are worried in these systems. So it is important that you use cultural adaptations and that we educate and introduce the next nation to empowering practices that our ancestors used in an effort to heal. And so there is, and I saw the question, there's a lot of work that's being done in an effort to do research to demonstrate what works in the Black community. And you have brothers like Sean Joe out there, you have other brothers out there who are constantly writing and reading about what needs to happen in order to heal the community. And of course, Dr. Joy, she comes together and she teaches about the power, what happened in the past and how that manifests itself currently into oppression and how we liberate ourselves from those systems.
Well, I'll add to that. She's mentioned Dr. Joy DeGroat, who was one of my teachers, but also who came out with the theory of post-traumatic slavery syndrome. But also, I'm going to add into conversation Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, also a friend and a teacher. And she's the one who birthed the concept of historical trauma. That is a trauma that is experienced by a people because some type of mass catastrophe, and how that trauma is being passed down to the second generation. So under her teachings, I found out that substance abuse is not our problem. Child sexual assault is not our problem. Gun violence is not our problem. These are manifestations of the problem of genocide and slavery. So if we are blaming the victim for what they are experiencing, we're not getting to the root of it. So Black social workers are saying that we have to understand historical trauma, and when we do our services, it's also to say that I'll give you an example. Face Piggyback said, we don't serve clients, we serve our family members. So when people came into our organization, we didn't call them clients, we called them strivers. And so therefore we're using this principle of Kudijakalea, self-determination, to define what we do. We said we don't do drug treatment. What we said we do resocialization. So we're starting to, and it's been going on for many, many years now. I think the deficiency is that all the things that we have done, we haven't brought it all together in one place. And I think that's the next step. How do we bring the work of Bobby Wright, right? The work that is, there's Association of Black Psychologists, another national organization that or sister organization of ours, right? We still have to bring everything at the table and do an assessment of all the things we have, and then demand that these become the clinical interventions that we use with our people. Amos Wilson, for example, right? There's so many we can go down the list that still hasn't been able to have its full utility yet. And this is the work of this generation.
And when you look at Umoja and unity, Baba Leonard at the Million Man March stood and formed an organization that is now called Black Family Summit. He accepted the charge of the Honorable Minister Farrakhan to bring Black professionals together so we can use our individual expertise to make a collective impact and difference. Because when you have 2,000 social workers, we got strong social work skills, but who can do the marketing? Who can do other aspects of what needs to be done? So when you bring 29 Black organizations like Black firefighters, Black veterans, Black psychologists, Black psychiatrists, Black lawyers, when you bring in all this expertise to the table like Black Family Summit does, it gives us an opportunity to know who to call in those areas, in those levels of expertise, in an effort to move the needle, because we have the same goals. In NABSW, we talk about actions, and it's an acronym because accountability is number one. We are accountable to the communities that raised us, the communities we live and we serve. As Baba said, they're not our client, they're our family. These are people that we grew up, and we also have to collaborate with like-minded individuals to transform and come up with innovative practices to have the outcomes and the solutions that we need. It cannot be done in a linear fashion. As African people, we are circular. It is a continuous circle thing that we give and we continue, and the circle should never be broken. And we acknowledge that as a lifelong education. In our African-centered program, in the African-centered program that we have, the majority of people in there are PhDs or 20 or 30-year practitioners, because we know that we need to continue to learn and that we need to continue to teach practices that are strength-based and that are African-centered so we can educate, because we didn't learn it in school. We are focused on a micro level, and I say it loud, I'm Mac and I'm proud, because the answer is macro. The answer that we're dealing with, we get focused on what's happening to individuals. Oh, Mike got a problem, John got a problem, Anthony got a problem. Well, it's a whole lot of Mikes, John, and Anthony out there. That is not an individual problem. That is a systemic problem that is manifesting all over the country. And the power is in Pan-Africanism, that as African people, that we come together and that we work together and ignite liberating practices.
So I've just really loved this conversation, and y'all keep talking about this macro. I know BabaJay talked about we can't solve macro problems with micro solutions. My queen sister, you talked about macro as well. Before we turn to Q&A, Leonard, Dunston, do you have any comments or remarks before we turn to Q&A? It doesn't have to be on the specific questions, just anything that you feel that you want to share that rounds it out. I will say this is the summertime that we're in now. We still have over 50 people on this line. I didn't know we were going to have, but that just shows the importance of this particular topic. So Baba Lenny?
No, I think I'll defer, because there might be some questions that someone would like to raise. I just can't help but continue to keep into our consciousness the significance of keeping our ancestors who played such a significant role in this conversation. I did not mention, and I felt so bad about it afterwards, Sister Shashi McIntyre, for example, and the persons who were very significant in helping me shape my understanding of the significance of reparations. It was her whose home we used to have meetings just to make sure that we were grounded. And that's where I met, in a very more formal way, Sister Dorothy Benton Lewis at the home of Sister Charshi McIntyre. I'll stop there because, again, you don't want to just reminisce about the past, but I think oftentimes we tend to think that the reparations movement had its origins within the last 10 or so years, but we tend to often not raise the names of those who struggled back in the day when it was not popular to raise this whole issue and this whole conversation about reparations. So I had to raise her name. And I think the era that I came out of was significant because Harlem in the late 60s in particular was like the epicenter of the Black independence movement. You had at that time, Malcolm was just about to be assassinated. He was about to be succeeded by Minister Farrakhan at Temple Number 7 there in Harlem. Adam Clayton Powell was at his peak in terms of his ministry at his church. The Marcus Garvey movement, while it was not as prominent as it had been in the early 40s, it was still a very strong movement. And again, I can't lift the name of Queen Audley Moore because it was through her that those of us who had never heard much about the Marcus Garvey movement knew about the Marcus Garvey movement. So those are the things that kind of strike me as we go through this conversation. The New York City Black Panther Party, for example, was just beginning to get off the ground. It was late 60s, early 70s. And its chapter was under significant siege in 1970. So, and they had a whole chapter that dealt with, excuse me, reparations. So, as we are going through this, I'm just remembering and playing back that moment. And last and certainly not least, there's a brother whose name I just had to call up because those of us who come out of that era, we oftentimes get upset with those who do not know him in his activist role, and that was a brother by the name of Ozzie Davis. Ozzie Davis was very active with Sini, and eventually there was another brother who came along. He was a little bit behind him, and that was Herbert Daughtry. And the three of them were pushing reparations in a way that no one could ever recall. And I call out Ozzie Davis because Ozzie Davis called Sini Williams the greatest Black organizer that he had ever met. Now, coming from someone of his stature, and I know that I'm playing up Sini Williams' name, but there are a lot of folk in this movement who have never heard of Sini Jomo Williams, who's the president, as I said earlier, first president of the National Association of Black Social Workers. But that's a name that people just need to know about because when you talk about reparations, as I said earlier, he's my Jegna. It was him who introduced me to this whole movement. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that history, Baba Lenny. Is really important for us to be able to hear and grow and learn from you. But right now, everyone, we're going to go over into the Q&A questions. Just for folks that's on the line, this webinar ends at 2:15, so we still have some time to go and to address the questions. I'm going to start with this question from Jan, who said, yes, Sister Melissa, are we close to any research that is like Black-based, evidence-based practices, or are you referring to something else that is Black-based that you would utilize?
Well, I definitely, if you look up African-centered cultural adaptations, you will see research that's done that encourages and allows that we use the principles similar to the Nguza Saba, Ma'at, things of that nature in order to work with our community and to heal. So there is a lot of work being done in an effort to do that, in an effort to demonstrate that in our community, and they have demonstrated in our community that African-centered practices work. Number one, African people are primarily skeptical of Western practices and Western psychology. So if you talk to a brother who could be in serious crisis, he don't want to go to a mental health doctor, right? But he will have a conversation with a sister who understands where he's coming from. And although you may be doing mental health treatment, it is not in a rigid, sterile environment where you're looking at him like he is a client or he's a patient, as opposed to he's somebody who he's working to help, you know. So one of the things that we have talked about and really just trying to educate our community on, there are other things out there that we can utilize collectively. Spirituality is a major thing that has helped our ancestors get over in whatever form that you chose to use it in. I met with someone whose husband had died unexpectedly on Saturday, and she was pretty despondent. She couldn't talk, but the only thing she kept calling on was her creator. She was calling on her savior. She was calling on that strength, and it was empowering her. She continued to repeat it, and it was empowering her. And I was saying, sister, you're doing better than you think. And by the time we finished, she was in a powerful position where her eyes was open, where she could stand up, because she was more concerned about how her children were responding, her grandchildren responding in the immediate loss of her husband. So there is strength in what the ancestors did, and it's important that we learn from those strengths. Our answers are not necessary in medication and white folks' education. It is really about how we can liberate utilizing practices that have gotten us this far, the resilient nature of the community that has survived in spite of direct, consistent oppression.
I would like to add to that. Edward Nichols out of DC, he's a psychologist, industrial psychologist, and he talks about how people create a certain kind of personality in the early stages of their development. And Europeans, that whole thing is counting and measuring, right? If you can't count it, you can't measure it, it doesn't count. But there's a whole reason for that. African people, we placed our highest value on the relationship. We didn't have to look for food because we could pick an avocado, an orange, a banana, so forth and so on. So we have to understand that they want us to not get back to our culture, because that makes us strong. Let me give you an example. Last week, I was in Milwaukee, and when I asked the question, see, the Dogon, when they meet together, they say, God sent you, how's your health? I asked that question, and in the audience was a sister who said, I'm not doing well at all. I can't make sense of anything. They kidnapped my daughter. They raped her. They murdered her, and they dismembered her body. This woman was totally in a state of shock and has been since that has happened. What we did at that point was put her in the middle of the circle, have all the women come around her, and they're praying on her and hugging her and holding her. And then we posted the men on the outside of the circle. Now, remember, this is what the Patois people did. They call them pygmies, but they're not pygmies. They said, anytime there's any disturbance in any individual, it's going to reverberate outside into the community. So we have to bring them back into harmony. We have to bring them back into Muid, right? So in that place in Milwaukee last week, I asked, was there a singer amongst us? This sister started singing, was able to change the whole environment because we were able to reach back into our traditional healing methods, right? That's that evidence-based. That's the cultural power of who we are as a people. And our fight for liberation is for us to do the things that we know that works for us. This is the fight. This is what liberation is. Going back to our tradition. Emma Cabral says, return to the source. That is our answer.
Baba Lenny, did you want to add anything to that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So we have a question from David, who says, I'm curious about the nationality/border as a colonial construct, and how can we be explicit about reparations as decolonial practices or praxis?
You know, the decolonization is about land and taking over spaces, right? These are not places, even calling this America. This is an indigenous space. There were people here. How you discover something, and when you get here, there are people here. You discover the people, you claim the land, you reclaim that space. That's a lot of what's going on in the Middle East right now. That's part of the issue that takes place. That whose land is it? Who created the Middle East? Was it always there? What was that a compromise of to bring about those constructs? So the concept of what's real and what's imposed, but the real liberation efforts is through reparations and decolonization. How can we decolonize? Because that is the effort in which they have utilized to take over and to continue to oppress.
So we go back to 1885, the Berlin Conference, when Africa was cut up like a pie. That is the problems we have in Africa and therefore the world. So what is not only in terms of what's happening in Africa, but remember what we're seeing that's happening between the cooperation between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso is phenomenal, because they are really moving to create a core of the United States of Africa, the same thing that Sekou Touré tried to do back in the 60s. So we haven't forgotten, you know, what we have to do, but also the thing which we have not really fully appreciated, that we are living in a domestic colony. It's not just the colonies in Africa, it's the domestic colony that we live under here in the United States. That's why it's so important to understand our work has to be about decolonization, yes, of our minds and of our communities. Why? Because we are living in micro domestic colonies. Only that type of analysis is going to free us. That's what Dr. Martin Luther King said, but nobody heard that speech. Dr. Martin Luther King said, Black people are living in domestic colonies. Indeed, we are. And when we start to look at our situation from that vantage point, we know that we must move towards self-determination.
Thank you. So we had another question this is from Erica. How do you grapple with or navigate the soft policing that social service systems uphold and originate from? Soft policing as in surveillance, scrutiny, and punishment if the healer or person seeking healing does not comply with the wants of the state.
People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, they have a workshop called Undoing Racism. And in that workshop, they point out how we are gatekeepers. Now, in a system of oppression, you don't have a choice, but you do have a choice about what type of gatekeeper you're going to be. So yes, we have to point out how social workers were the ones who came into the house, looked for that man, and if they found that man, then they would take that woman off of welfare. Why? Because the state wanted to replace us as men, and they did a very good job of that, unfortunately. So yes, we have to look at the systems of how they work. But when you are making those decisions as an individual, what is called a mandated reporter, you have to ask yourself, what's the consequence of what I'm going to do when I make this call? We have the power as social workers to say, am I going to make this call or not? And not say that I'm going to make it based upon what the so-called profession. Because in our code of ethics, we say, I regard my primary obligation the welfare of the Black individual, Black family, and Black community, and will engage in action for improving social conditions. We must always make our decisions based upon that.
And also what it also says is we make no distinction between the people that we work with, their destiny, and our own. So them surviving and them doing well is a part of our own individual success, not to maintain the status quo of systems we know that don't do for us. When you're talking about the child welfare system, which Black people are overrepresented, we are not overrepresented for abuse. It is because of neglect. Neglect is a poverty issue. So your child don't have on the right outfit. Your child don't have on the right shoes. Your child can't get to school on time because you live in public housing that's, I don't know how far away, and your child can't get there. So really being solution focused and realizing that the issue is not a micro problem. It is a macro system problem. It is a system problem, and really working to attack the system. When you hear about people who are on public assistance and public housing, the biggest beneficiary of public assistance and public housing are landlords. The biggest beneficiary of SNAP food stamp benefits are grocery stores. When you start talking about cutting benefits, that's when grocery stores get upset because they think they're going to lose money. So what you have to really do is redefine who the beneficiary is and who is really being oppressed and who's helping in this situation. Because trust me, they may say they want Section 8 to end. They're making way too much money off of Section 8 for it to end and coming up with ways to protect themselves as landowners and landlords as opposed to the clients. Why can't we buy our clients' houses? I'm paying rent and mortgages on people's houses that our people could own and can definitely benefit from that assistance. So it's real important that we don't allow the problem to be defined for us, that we do a high level of critical thinking and look at who is really benefiting off of people going to jail. I mean, the community is certainly not safer on going to jail. Who is benefiting? The privatization of jail systems, that's who's benefiting. And if they got an empty jail cell, that means they losing money. So they got to make sure that the system is intact where they can keep those beds filled so they can ensure that they get the resources that they need. So we don't allow you to define what the problem is. We define the problem and we work with our people to navigate a system we know is designed not to help them.
I'm looking at the panel and I'm noticing that this is irregular. And what I mean by that, anytime you have social workers together, you're going to see the highest number of social workers being women. So they have 2 men on the panel and 1 woman. This is not the norm, y'all. So I want you to know that. But you know what? It's equal to the same problem in terms of education. Where are Black men as educators? They are a minority number, right? Where are Black men as social workers? I wasn't told earlier to invite, to be invited into the social work practice as a man. It just kind of happened that way, right? But we have to do better in terms of educating and let folks know, become a social worker and follow the tradition of Baba Leonard Dunston. Follow traditions of Sister Melissa. We have the examples now of how to make it work. If you look at the logo, right, it has a spear and it has a scroll, right? Being educated, but we say we are the spear of the movement, and both of those things have to work together. And it's really easy to get seduced, right, into the intellectual part of it, but we have to make it real in terms of the real world. How do you change knowledge? How do you change information to knowledge? By being aware of it, by accepting it, and by applying it. And this is what we must continue to do. We must apply what we know.
And the social work field has changed because when you look at the people who Baba Leonard talked about, those were community organizers. And I was in grad school, I had no idea. This was in 93, 94. They asked in my class, what does everybody want to do? Everybody want to be a clinician. I had no idea that social workers were clinicians because every social worker I knew, they were community organizers. They were about sitting at the table, Tony Brown's journal. If you want to see Sini Jomo Williams actually speak, go to Tony Brown's journal in 1973, where at the same table, you had Angela Davis, where you had Kwame Ture, where you had Fannie Lou Hamer. You had all of these community organizers. None of them was talking about evidence-based practices. None of them were trying to diagnose the community or psychopharmacology. They all were talking about, they understood the problem was external, and they were about fighting, like you see in that logo, to use our education and knowledge to fight this system of oppression. Not 55 minutes of mental health treatment, 26 sessions in order to get, I don't need 26 sessions to see what's wrong with you. What's wrong with you is oppression. What's wrong with you is we need to tear down some of these systems. And in 1964, Malcolm X, the same year that Martin Luther King wrote the letter from Birmingham jail, he spoke on the bullet, the ballot, and the bullet. He didn't have much confidence that we would have to fight our way out through liberation efforts in order to liberate ourselves from these stressful systems. Should we vote? Yes, we should vote, but we shouldn't stop at the vote. We have to hold the people accountable, because what happens is if you split the white vote and we vote in a block, we need to hold the winner accountable to our community for the work that we've done to get where we are.
So Jam, why don't we do this? Since we only have about 5 minutes left, why don't you just choose a couple of questions, and as part of our panelist closing, if you want to respond to those questions, you can, or however you want to frame. But let's just hear just a couple of more questions from the audience, and then have each of our panelists make a closing statement, either with those questions or in whatever manner they choose. How's that sound? Whew, this has been riveting. I mean, we could go on and on all afternoon, but we said 2:15. So go on, Jam.
Okay, so there's really like two questions that I think it would be great to end on for everyone. One of them is this is Tatiana, any tips for introducing reparations to youth that is trauma informed? And then another question is more organizational informed, like how do you heal illnesses that may be impacting Black organizations that are trying to move forward in either in social work or reparations?
So I will close by recommending healing circles. ABSI and Mental Health Network, they all are both a Black Family Summit. They have online healing circles available. And the healing circles has a format, and it's extremely powerful. It can be done online. It can be done face-to-face. They even have trained the trainers on how to heal our community, how to teach about the traumas of the past, how they're affecting us right now, and how to utilize strength-based spiritual practices that our ancestors used to move forward. So if you are not familiar with it, look at ABSI, which is Association of Black Psychologists, All Healers Network. Look for what they have, and they call them healing circles. And they work very well with youth. They work very well with organizations in order for us to get past the issues that we have one another and really look at what the root of those problems are.
BabaJay, and then we're going to end with Baba Dunston.
Thank you. I would add with that, there's something called Emancipation Emotional Circles that the organization out of Connecticut has created. I can't think of the name right now, just over my head, but we have to, so these circles are like 7 sessions that's open to the public. I would ask that people start to use it as our first level of first aid emotional medicine. And we have to affirm the fact that we are each other's liberation medicine. And I'm going to conclude by saying Dr. Mutulu Shakur was a brother, and other brothers in the South Bronx said that we can't replace one drug with another. It's unacceptable to try to get rid of heroin addiction by using methadone. So he came up with the 5 points, right? So, and Cobra has a campaign called Millions for Mutulu, is that we want to get to the point 100 times 10 times 10, all the way up to 1 million, that we know we declare August 8th, the Dr. Mutulu Shakur Community Health Day, and we start to get trained in the 5, what you call auricular points, not just for addiction, but also the stress that we experience as a people. So I would invite people to be in touch with me, and I can give them information about that. I'm complete. Sante Sana.
Okay, thank you so very much. And Baba Lenny, and I just remember a story you told me once about Sini Williams, who you have lifted up as part of this series, and a convention that the National Association of Black Social Workers was having in South Africa during the apartheid era, and how he refused to be listed as an honorary white. I don't know if you want to share that as part of your closing, or anything you want to say in part of your closing, but it always had a profound impact on me. Learning way back in those days, people standing up for righteousness and justice, and these were social workers and the head of the National Association of Black Social Workers back in those days. So we're going to turn it over to you, Baba Lenny Dunston, for the last word from our panelists.
Well, let me first of all say again my deepest and profound gratitude to you and your co-hosts for hosting the 3 of us today and giving us an opportunity to share with you our understanding of how Black social workers can make contributions to the reparations movement and how we've tried to make a contribution. Yes, Brother Senior Jomo Williams, that's how he got his name, was in 1974, he was invited to go to South Africa, and it was during the apartheid era. And for those who may not know, and thank you for always lifting up his spirit, Sister Nkichi. There were a number of organizations who went to South Africa in 1974 and stayed in white hotels, but Sini chose not to do so. If you stayed in a white hotel, you were, as you said earlier, automatically given what was called honorary citizenship. He chose not to do that. He chose to stay in South Africa, in Soweto, to be more specific. And I'll make this comment. In 1997, during my last year as president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, I had the distinct honor of going to South Africa as president of NABSW. We took 190 people with us, and my beautiful ancestor wife and I, the night before we went to Soweto, I was invited to a radio show there in South Africa, in Johannesburg to be specific. And there's a song, and I will not play it and say it, but it's by a brother named Jonas Gowanus, and it's called Flowers of a Nation. If you ever get a chance to play Flowers of a Nation, you will find it to be the most beautiful song you've probably ever heard. But I say that because this sister was able to share with the Soweto community that Black social workers would be in Soweto the very next day. And when we got to Soweto, I was welcomed by the community and all of us who were part of the delegation. But what was significant about it was there were four brothers who were a part of the beginning of our South African chapter. And two of them were members of the group who were incarcerated with Nelson Mandela at Robbins Island. And they were there to really greet us and remind us that it was because of Sini's presence that we even had if they had any idea there was something called Black social workers. And that's how our chapter got started in South Africa in 1974 as a result of Sini's visit. But most specifically, what I wanted to just share with the family is that that group said that had not been for Sini's presence, they would have never known what it meant to be a Black person who could be independent thinking rather than having to depend on white folk. So I'll end my comment that way by saying, working together, the ants ate the elephant.
Wow. Thank you so very much for that. Working together, the ants ate the elephant, I'm sorry. Hopefully everyone is looking in the chat to see the resources that have been put in there from AB side to Community Healing Network and many others. I just want to say that reparations can be a vehicle for transformational change. Indeed, reparations may be the only policy that comprehensively addresses the very crux of racism and inequity, the harms from government and related policies from the enslavement era that still manifest today in nearly every aspect of life, from health, wealth, educational inequities to cultural deprivations and mass incarceration. So on behalf of JAM and myself, JAM, Jessica and Mitchell Abuwa of the National Black Cultural Information Trust, and myself, Nkichi Taifa with the Reparation Education Project, we really want to thank BabaJay Dr. Onaje Muid within NCOBA's Health Commission, our dear sister Melissa Haley, the current president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, and of course our dear Baba Elder Leonard Dunston, Chair Emeritus of NABSW, and so many other things, who walked with legends and giants, who he himself is a legend and giant, and something that I'm not quite sure. Someone said something about reminiscing. We need to have a session just on reminiscing, memory, and reminiscing the elders and bringing them into this space where I just, yeah. So Jam, you go on and totally close this out. But again, I just want to say, Asante Sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was a good closing right there. Everyone be on the lookout for the recording. It will be sent to everyone that was an attendee. I'm just giving Melissa a couple of seconds. I think you were typing an answer to a question. I'm not sure. But if not, we'll just go ahead and close it out. The recording will be made available. And if you have any direct questions for our panelists, you can just email them to info@nbcit.org and we will forward them for you. But thank you again for joining us, and please go ahead and enjoy your day. Thank you so much.